Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Dr. Nadia Hasan, and I'm the director of the Islamophobia Research Hub at York University. Today, we're here in Ottawa on the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, and we recognize that acknowledgement of the land is one step towards reconciliation. I'd like to thank the leaders from the Ottawa Muslim and Palestinian communities who join us today. Thank you all for being here. We all stand in front of you today against the devastating backdrop of destruction, starvation, settler violence, and what many experts are calling a genocide in Gaza. Many Canadians from diverse backgrounds have been speaking out, drawing attention to these atrocities, and demanding action and change from our governments, institutions, and fellow Canadians. For this, many Canadians have paid an unfair price. In the aftermath of October 2023, Canada saw a rise in anti-Palestinian racism, Islamophobia, and anti-Arab racism that affects many areas of life and work for Canadians. Today, we're launching a report that illuminates these impacts in detail. Put together by a team of researchers at the Islamophobia Research Hub, our report, documenting the Palestine exception, an overview of trends in Islamophobia, anti-Palestinian racism, and anti-Arab racism in Canada since October 7, 2023, compiles a range of incidents related to speaking out against the violations of Palestinian human rights. In addition, whether or not they speak out, many Muslims, Palestinians, and Arabs in Canada and those perceived to be from these communities have reported experiencing Islamophobia, racism, discrimination, and hate at a time of heightened scrutiny, securitization, and stigmatization of their identities. The report includes these as well. The range of incidents documented in the report include hate-motivated crimes such as violent assaults, vandalism, and arson, discrimination, doxing, and blacklisting in employment provision of services and educational spaces as they relate to Muslim, Palestinian, and Arab Canadians, as well as those speaking out against the persecution of Palestinians. It includes disinformation, including foreign interference, fake news, and unfounded accusations, attacks on academic freedom, freedom of expression, and student safety in elementary, secondary, and post-secondary educational settings, and civil liberties violations related to protests and dissent. Our report is based on data on incidents gathered through consultations with 16 different Canadian community organizations whose work focuses on Islamophobia, anti-Arab, and anti-Palestinian racism. The information included in this report is based on interviews with these organizations, data that some of these organizations provided, publicly available data, as well as media reports from October 2023 to November 2024, with some more recent updates. It is important to note that while there are details of nearly 100 incidents included in this report, they represent a small fraction of the cases reported to these organizations. But they provide important insights into the lived experiences and material realities of Islamophobia, anti-Palestinian racism, and anti-Arab racism in Canada. Unfair targeting, censorship, discipline, and punishment of those speaking out against Israeli state violence, for Palestinian human rights, or those simply perceived to be Palestinian is a common theme in many of the incidents we recount in the report. And this is particularly disturbing when it comes to the experiences of Canadian youth. Young people in our education systems, post-secondary campuses, and young professionals are facing Islamophobia, anti-Palestinian racism, and anti-Arab racism across a range of experiences. These include employment discrimination, doxing, hate-motivated violence, bullying, discipline and suppression of democratic rights and freedoms based on their identities or their support for Palestinian human rights. This is a phenomenon that investigation after investigation has found to be an unfair sanctioning of, and I quote, a valid exercise of freedom of speech, as Justice MacDonald put it, in relation to the treatment of law students at Toronto Metropolitan University, or a broader pattern of erasure of Palestinian identity from the top authorities in our school systems, as Patrick Case found in his report about the Grassy Narrows incident at the Toronto District School Board. Students as young as in elementary school have been admonished for outward displays of Palestinian culture and identity, including right here in Ottawa. What perhaps compounds these harms is the complicity and shortcomings of many political leaders at multiple levels of government in Canada, including elected officials and institutional leaders partaking in spreading disinformation about students, intimidating public rhetoric, or a failure to intervene and take action to protect democratic rights and freedoms. Our concern is that instead of taking a pedagogical approach, our institutions have taken a punitive one. We've seen a culture of swift demonization and ostracization of young people who speak out for Palestinian human rights rather than one of pedagogical engagement, critical thinking, and youth empowerment. And we see that this is taking root in Canada in concerning ways. In addition to the notable and concerning impacts on youth in Canada, the report provides details about many others who have faced similar sanctions, reprisals, and violence. The report makes 15 recommendations to address Islamophobia, anti-Palestinian, and anti-Arab racism. These recommendations range from echoing calls for a recognition of and adoption of a definition of anti-Palestinian racism, to accountability for hate-motivated crimes cases, to independent reviews of how post-secondary and public education institutions have handled addressing Islamophobia, anti-Palestinian, and anti-Arab racism on campus. Beyond bearing witness to what many in Canada have experienced over the last 20 months, our hope is that this report contributes to efforts to combat the Palestine exception and strengthen democratic rights and freedoms for all. Because what is deeply painful for many of the people that we consulted for this report is the erasure of the horrific realities of Palestinians in Gaza and the silencing of those who seek to exercise their most basic democratic rights to make it visible. The report is available on the Islamophobia Research Hub website at yorku.ca/laps/research/Islamophobia. Thank you for being here, and thank you to all who were involved in the creation of this report.
Bon matin. Je m'appelle Amira Elghawaby et je suis ici aujourd'hui en tant que représentante spéciale du Canada dans la lutte contre l'islamophobie. C'est un honneur pour moi de me joindre à mes collègues et membres des communautés canadiennes musulmanes, arabes et palestiniennes pour mettre en valeur le rapport sans précédent que publie le Hub de recherche sur l'islamophobie de l'Université York ce jour même. Comme l'a clairement indiqué la Dr Nadia Hasan, ce document détaillé fournit une photo instantanée qui traverse l'ensemble des secteurs de la société canadienne pour montrer la façon dont les droits et les libertés démocratiques du Canada ont été menacés et violés depuis octobre 2023. This report holds up a mirror to our institutions and shows that our shared values of human rights, equity, fairness, and anti-discrimination have too often been undermined or even abandoned when it comes to freedom of expression around Palestine and the protection of Palestinian, Muslim, and Arab Canadians. This is not entirely new, but what this report makes clear is the scale and urgency of what has unfolded over the past 21 months, a sharp and dangerous rise in Islamophobic, anti-Palestinian, and anti-Arab rhetoric and incidents that demand immediate action. Many of the cases in this report were brought to the attention of my office, others shared through the media, or reported to community organizations. Taken individually, many of these are shocking in and of themselves. Taken altogether, they point to a system of oppression. These dangerous trends must be interrupted before doing further harm. We see this in the case of a young boy named Hamza, attacked in the York Region School Board by students who called him Hamas. His parents had to move him to another school after their safety concerns were ignored. We see it in the experience of a student being called a terrorist for wearing a keffiyeh, or an elementary school student being prevented from displaying the Palestinian flag in his online profile. We see it in the censorship and silencing of Canadians who defend Palestinian human rights, with real consequences on their livelihoods and on their futures. And we see it in the institutional silence, in the failure to condemn violence against innocent Palestinians and to show solidarity as Islamophobia, anti-Palestinian, anti-Arab racism surge. These incidents must be part of the public record because the patterns they reveal are not over. They continue to this day across Canada and must be confronted if we are to uphold the promise of a Canada where people are treated fairly, without discrimination, in accordance with our human rights, our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. As Canada's Special Representative, my role is to advise and support government efforts to combat Islamophobia and to raise awareness of the diverse intersecting identities of Muslims in Canada. This report advances that work and the work of all institutions. It highlights where we do have much work to do, where we must go next, especially to protect young people who are facing physical harm, exclusion, and violence. Canada has defined Islamophobia as racism, stereotypes, prejudice, fear, or acts of hostility directed towards Muslims, those perceived as Muslim, as well as unfairly lead to viewing our communities as a greater security threat on an institutional, systemic, and societal level. Le Canada a défini l'islamophobie comme étant le racisme, les stéréotypes, les préjudices, la peur ou les actes d'hostilité dirigés contre les musulmans ou qui mènent à voir et à traiter les musulmans comme une menace à la sécurité à un niveau institutionnel, systémique et sociétal. Not a day goes by where our communities are not described in negative, hateful terms, and it has become far too frequent to hear about vandalism, assault, harassment, and in particular, the targeting of Muslim women who wear hijab. Words of hate have real-life consequences. Old tropes that surged after 9/11 are back, amplified by the far right and others, and used again to dehumanize our communities, especially Palestinian, Muslim, and Arab Canadians. In our recently published guide on understanding and combating Islamophobia, we describe anti-Palestinian racism, a term used by civil society to name the systemic discrimination targeting Palestinian Canadians, a group of more than 45,000 people in this country, many of whom are Muslim, but are also Christian and of other faiths. As demonstrated in this report, this form of discrimination has extended beyond Palestinians, making it crucial that we work collectively to address it wherever it manifests, separately or in combination with Islamophobia or other forms of oppression. As Canadians of all backgrounds, we are witnessing events that human rights experts and organizations have described as a genocide. The resulting tension and pain in our communities is real. We must cherish and uphold the right to speak up for international law. We must cherish and ensure that international law, human dignity are upheld and acknowledge that thousands of Canadian Palestinians are living with daily grief and trauma that no one should endure. Nous devons nous réunir autour de nos valeurs communes, et cela signifie de nous exprimer contre l'islamophobie, l'antisémitisme, le racisme anti-arabe et anti-palestinien, ainsi que toutes les formes de discrimination. We stand united against all forms of hate, Islamophobia, anti-Palestinian racism, anti-Arab racism, anti-Semitism, and all other forms of discrimination. The stakes could not be higher. We must meet the moment. As political figures, office holders, civil servants, journalists, academics, or as citizens, we have a duty to know, we have a responsibility to act.
Peace and blessings be upon all of you. My name is Abdurrahman Amoud, and I'm here on behalf of Islam Care Center, right at the heart of Centertown, Ottawa. The Islam Care Center has served the overall Centertown, Ottawa community here for over 30 years, providing spiritual care, social, and mental health care services. I come before you today not only as a representative of the Islam Care Center, but as someone whose community continues to bear the brunt of growing Islamophobia in this country. Not long after October 2023, someone smeared feces on the front door of our center. A place of worship, support, and refuge was treated with the kind of contempt meant to degrade and to dehumanize. Not long after, an intruder broke in and urinated on the carpets of our Family Services Agency. These disgusting acts of hate left our staff, volunteers, and the people who rely on our services shaken, humiliated, and deeply hurt. These are not isolated acts of vandalism. They are hateful acts meant to send a clear message that we are unwelcome, that our presence is offensive, that our dignity can be violated without consequence. But let me be equally clear. We will not be intimidated. We will not be shamed into silence. And we will not retreat from public life. We will not retreat from public life because of cowardly acts rooted in fear and ignorance. This is why the release of today's report, documenting the Palestine exception by the Islamophobia Research Hub, is so important. This report does more than document incidents. It connects the dots. It shows how Islamophobia is not just expressed through physical attacks, but also through silencing of Muslim voices, through the marginalization of our grief, and through the policing of our political expression. Our communities are targeted for speaking out, for organizing, for showing solidarity, and for refusing to separate our faith from our humanity. This report gives language and evidence to what we have known for a very long time, that Islamophobia is not just about racial slurs or violence. It's about erasure, surveillance, and exclusion. We are tired of having to prove that our pain is real. We are tired of asking institutions to care. So today, we welcome this report not just as documentation, but as affirmation of our collective experiences, as a call to action, and as a demand for change. Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Nadia Hasan, and I'm here as a member of the Association of Palestinian Arab Canadians, known as APAC, and a proud Palestinian. The past 18 months have been some of the most mentally and emotionally exhausting of our lives. We are witnessing our families and friends in Palestine face genocide, displacement, and forced starvation. These are the same traumatic images and stories that our parents lived through and managed to survive more than 77 years ago. And while the grief is heavy, and what makes it even harder is how that grief is silenced right here in Canada. This report documents what so many of us already know. Anti-Palestinian racism is real, and it's happening in our classrooms and our workplaces. We want our children to grow up proud of who they are. We want them to celebrate their Palestinian heritage with dignity and pride. To be able to speak their mind and defend their human rights, any human rights, fearlessly, without worrying that they'll be reprimanded in a classroom, passed over for an opportunity in the workplace, or punished for simply speaking about their heritage. But right now, that's not the reality. Students have been shamed for speaking about Palestine. These students are being denied the ability to mourn their family, to mourn the death of their family members just because they are Palestinian. We have watched friends whisper the word Palestine because they fear losing their jobs. We have seen people targeted for speaking up, but their stories rarely make the news because they're too afraid to come forward. And that's why the phrase in this report, the Palestinian exception, is so accurate. It feels that institutions and our society will support all human rights except Palestinian rights. It will celebrate all cultures except Palestinian culture. And it will condemn all forms of racism except anti-Palestinian racism. That silence is isolating and it's harmful. This report is a necessary step forward, naming that harm and breaking that silence, because our identity shouldn't be erased and our Palestinian community shouldn't be afraid. Thank you.
Thank you. We will turn it over to our question period, starting in the room with Rafi Bouchakanian from CBC.
Good morning. Dr. Nadia Hasan, I was wondering if you could say whether, to your knowledge, recognizing Nakba Day and having a working definition of APR would be a first for Canada in that no other countries have done this before? And how do you think these might help fight discrimination, these measures?
Yeah, I think both the affirmation of Palestinian identity and culture is a critical component, I think, of addressing the issues that are raised in the report. A lot of the people we spoke with identified it as one of the key ways of just ensuring that Palestinian identity and culture and history is not only affirmed, but also to work against the erasure of these experiences. So absolutely, I think these are important things for Canada to take very seriously, really important for the Canadian government to do it in consultation, robust consultation with Palestinians in Canada. And I think it would be a first and an important step for Canada to lead on.
Thank you. And if I may ask my follow-up to Amira Elghawaby, do you support these calls to have the Government of Canada recognize Nakba Day and to have a working definition of APR?
So thank you for the question, Rafi. My role is to provide advice to the federal government on the ways that Islamophobia has been impacting in our communities. And we know that anti-Palestinian racism is a form of discrimination that can intersect with Islamophobia. So in terms of these specific recommendations, as I've mentioned, this report will help inform the advice that I provide to the federal government. So we will be reviewing them. We will be looking at where they are related directly to my mandate, and then we'll be having discussions with decision makers on these recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Dylan Robertson from Canadian Press.
Thanks for taking our questions today. I'm wondering what you make of the pushback that APR gets. We see a lot from different conservative parties mostly. We see a lot from CEJA and some of the Jewish advocacy groups. They seem to imply that this, might minimize anti-Semitism. I guess I'm just wondering how you see the interplay of these two forms of discrimination and what your response is to that sort of comment.
Yeah, I think if you go through the report, the incidents that we document here, they portray a picture of something very wrong. Like there is a problem that needs to be addressed and it needs to be solved in a good faith, through a good faith engagement with impacted communities. And I have no doubt that those conversations are going to be difficult. I have no doubt that there will be lots of questions about how to get it right. But I think it can be done if the right processes are in place and how we consult, how we engage communities, and how we address the problem in a grounded way. There are lots of aspects of APR that I think need to be addressed and that this report raises. One of the things that is important here is to understand sort of the full gamut of what anti-Palestinian racism looks like in Canada, how it intersects with anti-Arab racism and Islamophobia. And I think that is absolutely possible, no matter how difficult.
I'm wondering how you would summarize the responses that we see in Canada to anti-Semitism and anti-Palestinian racism. Your report points out, after October 2023, that there was corporate statements, that there were donations made, that school boards were putting out statements, and then it seems like there had been a lack of response that you've documented from those same bodies. Mm-hmm. Like, what words describe that type of a response?
The type of response from the community, you mean?
The discrepancy between corporate Canada, school boards, having that sort of statement for what Hamas did, but not that sort of statement with what Israel did. What does that speak to for you?
I think that speaks to an erasure and a really devastating one of Palestinian experience and of Palestinian culture and identity. And I think that is one of the reasons why we not only suggest the recognition of a definition of APR, but also of concomitant efforts to educate, to train, and to raise awareness about anti-Palestinian racism in more robust ways. I do believe that the silence of many of our sort of institutional leaders was was really harmful in the sense not only of leaving out important aspects of the story and not recognizing the grief and the suffering of a whole community, but also it was dangerous in the sense that it set a tone. A lot of people interpreted it as a threshold for what's tolerable in their workplaces, in their educational spaces, of what they can and can't say. So what people in leadership positions say is important, and I think we need to start having very real conversations around anti-Palestinian racism, around Islamophobia, around anti-Arab racism, and how those comments are formulated and put out there.
Have any questions online. If you do have some more time, I would ask if Rafi or Dylan have any follow-ups to their questions that if you have time to take.
Yeah,
Sure,
we have like
I
about
would-
3 minutes. Yeah.
I wouldn't mind asking another question.
Sure.
You recommend the Office of the Ethics Commissioner to have clear policies
Yeah.
on disinformation that's disseminated by parliamentarians.
Yeah.
How would that work in the sense that I'm sure people would raise concerns about the Ethics Commissioner curtailing freedom of speech. So
Yeah.
how would you balance those two things?
Absolutely. I think that it would need to be a very balanced approach that is very attentive to ensuring that political speech is protected and that we have the most robust sort of democratic exchange of ideas that we can in our legislative bodies. But I do think there has to be some accountability of blatant circulation of disinformation done in like really irresponsible ways that harm and put a target on the backs of already marginalized communities. And I think that can be figured out on like through a balanced approach, measuring exactly what you're talking about.
Dylan, do you have any other questions?
I always have more questions. I was wondering, I don't mean to harp so much about Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, comparing them, but I guess I'm just wondering, would you use the term double standard? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but when you look at that sort of condemnation,
Yeah.
I think, Ms. Elghawaby and the anti-Semitism envoy have tried to work together. They've talked about how, it's not really a rosy picture for either community here. And yet what's in this report seems to suggest that the way this is being treated for one community is like very different for another. Is that a
Yeah.
double standard?
The report doesn't really compare, and to be honest, I think fighting against hate and standing up for our rights and freedoms is not a zero-sum game for different communities. And I think the pain of both communities can hold true at the same time. So for me, it's not really about a double standard as such. I think both anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and anti-Palestinian racism and anti-Arab racism need to be addressed directly. And I think we need to do the work, and hopefully this report contributes to the work of raising awareness and raising and deepening and widening our understanding of what those things look like.
Thank you. That will conclude our press conference. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone, for your time.
Thank you very much.